My golden boy brother went so far as to hire a private investigator to expose me as a failure. Instead, the investigator uncovered my multi-million-dollar success. I grew up in a quaint little village with my 2 siblings. I'm the middle child. Life in a place where everyone knows everyone else has its ups and downs. My father is a hardworking man, but keeps his emotions locked away. These days he's considering retirement. My mother is the complete opposite. She's always been dedicated to maintaining the household and living by the traditional values she grew up with. Both of my parents come from religious, conventional families. I love them deeply, but I've always felt like I've fallen short of their expectations. It's painful, knowing they see me as the disappointment of the family. Meanwhile, my older brother is their golden child. At 40, he's married to a calm, reserved woman. They have 2 sons who are enthusiastic about sports, especially the rough-and-tumble kind. To put it lightly, they're a handful. My brother takes it upon himself to act as my life coach. He works as a car salesperson at a local dealership, but his guidance often feels like he's treating me as a project he can't quite manage. It's as though I should be grateful for the scraps of his time and wisdom. He's quick to boast about his big house, his flashy cars, his so-called trophy wife, and his powerboat and all-terrain vehicles. It often feels less like advice and more like him flexing his supposed success. This dynamic only makes me feel more isolated. As a child, I was sensitive, often tearful, and never the strong athletic type. I was the one who found excuses when things didn't go my way. Bullying was a regular part of my school life, and I was excluded from most activities. Asthma added to my sense of alienation, and to make matters worse, my parents treated it as an insignificant issue. On top of that, I've dealt with depression for as long as I can remember. I was never the kid sprinting across a field or expertly throwing a football. My parents often compared me to my brother, pointing out how I wasn't as smart, social, or athletic as he was. It stung. School was tough. I graduated with a meager 2.5 grade point average. Later, I saved up enough to enroll in college, but I dropped out in my 2nd year. That decision sparked a family controversy. As for my younger sister, she was the family princess. She married young at 19 and now has 3 kids. I left home when she was still a teenager, so I didn't know her well then. Even now, as an adult, I see traces of that indulgence in her. She's not a bad person, just a bit spoiled. But she often treats me the way my parents and brother do, maybe because it's easier than becoming their target herself. Of her children, I relate most to her middle child. Like me, she's often teased and overshadowed, and I see parts of myself in her struggles. Being a middle child brings its own challenges. After leaving college, I leaned into my shy, nerdy side. I worked at a comic book and video game store for several years before it closed over 7 years ago. I loved that job, though my parents still act as if I'm employed there. That job introduced me to someone who shared my geeky interests and had big ambitions. Together, we founded a successful information technology support business. Eventually, my partner decided to sell our company to a larger corporation. The buyout left me with cash and stock options, which proved to be quite lucrative. I've since started several side projects and made smart investments that have grown into over $1 million in assets. Currently, I'm the Chief Technology Officer of a promising new startup. Despite my wealth, I live modestly. My 2-bedroom home in a great neighborhood is furnished entirely with second-hand items, and I drive a 15-year-old Saturn. I'm not in a relationship right now. My life is busy, and I attend therapy regularly. I also grapple with drinking, which my parents dismiss as purely a mental issue, much like they do with my depression and asthma. In spite of all this, I've managed to carve out a successful career and life for myself. Yet my parents still expect me to drive 90 to 120 minutes each way to join them for Sunday dinners. These meals often consume half my weekend. Their assumption that as an unmarried person, and as my brother puts it, a mental case, I have nothing better to do. These dinners are rarely pleasant. They involve unsolicited advice on marriage, raising a family, and being a real adult. Or I'm subjected to endless discussions about my brother's latest sales triumphs at the dealership. While they've never outright called me a mooch, the insinuation is clear if I ever skip a meal. It's frustrating and confusing. During therapy, I often ask myself why I continue to attend. My family has a way of downplaying or twisting my achievements. To this day, many people back home still think I work at the long-closed game store. My brother is remembered as the outgoing success, while I'm perpetually cast as the odd one out. This disparity makes it difficult to communicate my accomplishments. In their eyes, comics and video games are immature distractions, not the foundation of a thriving career. Despite my genuine expertise in technology, any attempt I made to discuss it with my family was often overshadowed. My brother would cut me off, acting as though I had no idea what I was talking about. Even when I knew he was spouting nonsense, I typically stayed quiet and let him go on. I was afraid to correct him because doing so would mean explaining my work and defending my expertise. Deep down, I feared they wouldn't value my career and that their opinion of me might worsen. I'll admit, I faced my share of struggles and at times been a complete mess. But everything changed last month. My brother somehow managed to get his hands on some of my personal information. The truth came out. He had hired a private investigator to conduct a so-called background check on my employment. I had a hunch he was planning some kind of intervention with my parents. However, what they uncovered took them completely by surprise. They learned my actual worth, that I didn't live in a run-down apartment, and other personal details about my life. Given that I work in security, the irony was not lost on me. When I started receiving alerts about unauthorized attempts to access my credit report, I traced the source of the breach and pieced it all together. It was a stunning revelation, and now I'm left dealing with my family's abrupt and unexpected shift in how they view me. The entire situation has been overwhelming, especially given our history of miscommunication and undervaluation. I was so upset by the invasion of my privacy that I decided to have the same private investigation firm look into my brother's finances. What I found was startling. My brother was living far beyond his means. The report revealed a file with Child Protective Services, several past arrests for driving while intoxicated and public intoxication, and domestic disturbance calls. He was juggling 3 mortgages on his house, struggling with Internal Revenue Service back payments, and had a credit profile in complete disarray. In contrast, my parents' situation was exactly as I had expected. They lived modestly and managed their finances pragmatically. I was so focused on preparing for a confrontation at the next family dinner that I didn't even stop to check on how my sister was doing. But the dinner wasn't at all what I anticipated. Instead of the usual dynamic, my parents began treating me with an odd sort of reverence, as though I were now the golden child. This sudden shift visibly rattled my brother. Halfway through the meal, he lost his temper. In an attempt to salvage his reputation, he started boasting about his recent sales commissions and a supposed promotion. I congratulated him, but couldn't resist subtly pointing out his debt, Internal Revenue Service troubles, and overextended credit. In doing so, I effectively exposed his financial disaster while still acknowledging his achievements. The atmosphere became uncomfortably tense. My parents' newfound admiration for me felt forced and unnatural, which only heightened the awkwardness. When I handed my brother a copy of the report, he initially denied everything, but I reminded him that it was his idea to use the same agency to investigate me. That moment felt like a small, fleeting victory. My parents were visibly shaken, reprimanding my brother and reacting with theatrical shock. They were equally disturbed to learn that the report required my social security number to be accessed. The whole ordeal was anything but pleasant, as it laid bare my family's greed and lack of respect for boundaries. Over the next hour, the atmosphere devolved further as accusations flew. My parents, brother, and I became locked in a cycle of blame. Long-standing grievances and buried tensions erupted. My sister's husband, my brother's wife, and their 5 children watched in stunned silence as our family fell apart like never before. Typically, these dinners followed a predictable pattern. My sister would share updates, my brother and his wife would brag about their lives, my mom would engage in casual conversation, and my dad would grumble about various things. But this was unprecedented, a total collapse. Instead of the usual passive-aggressive remarks about how I should aspire to be like my brother and be a real man, there was a shocked silence as decades of deeply rooted issues spilled out. My father, brother, and I ended up in a heated argument, dredging up every family dispute from the past 30 years. It felt like witnessing a live drama spiral out of control. In moments like these, all my negative feelings about my family felt validated. Oddly enough, I didn't feel any sense of triumph, just a heavy sense of regret. I realized I hadn't handled the situation well. While I was fully aware of my brother's flaws, what had I hoped to achieve by exposing his past? His children were now aware of his tumultuous history, something I hadn't intended. The breaking point came when my brother, in a fit of rage, yelled that I should never have been born. His words were cutting, but what stood out even more was my parents' frantic attempts to calm him, a level of desperation I had never seen before. He accused me of being the source of all the family's problems. My parents tried to intervene, but they never truly acknowledged or took responsibility for how they had treated me over the years. I felt both deeply saddened and oddly vindicated. It was a brutal, undeniable reminder of the core issues within our family dynamics. My parents kept finding reasons to accuse me of something or other until I couldn't take it anymore. They even implied that I had refused to help a sick niece or nephew, claiming that I'd chosen not to assist. The accusation came out of nowhere. I'd never heard anything about a sick family member, nor had anyone asked me for help. It felt like they were scrambling to find something, anything, to hold against me. I didn't push back on the claim, though. Instead, I asked, "I thought you believed I was still working at the comic book store?" That was a reminder I'd given them countless times before. Despite the fact that the store had closed in 2011, they never seemed to understand or care. The way they twisted our family history to suit their own narrative appalled me. Overwhelmed and frustrated, I drove home that night. It was a quiet drive, but my mind was anything but. Now I feel conflicted. Part of me feels betrayed, knowing they'll likely begin pressuring me for financial help now that they're aware of my success. I've seen them treat my brother this way, and I know I'll be next. Still, there's a lingering sense of obligation. Growing up was never easy. I was never the golden child. My brother's constant bullying and mistreatment were shrugged off by my parents, who acted like nothing was wrong. Whether he was kicking me, hitting me, or saying cruel, hurtful things, their reaction was always indifference. It was as though verbal and emotional abuse didn't count as real. That lack of acknowledgement stung. To this day, it pains me to know they don't see the harm they caused by ignoring it. And now, I've reached my limit. I've fought this battle for too long. Despite knowing they're my family, I can't ignore the toll they've taken on me. I believe it's time to step back, to begin a new chapter without them. Still, I wonder about the future. If I meet someone special, a partner I want to marry and build a family with, what happens then? How will I navigate introducing a new family into such a fractured dynamic? If I've already distanced myself, would that mean cutting ties altogether? It's a difficult puzzle to solve, and I have no easy answers. But one thing is clear, my family hasn't valued me for who I am. Now that they know I'm successful, their interest seems tied solely to my wealth. I know that's not love, it's opportunism. I am not defined by my family, and their treatment of me doesn't dictate my worth. For years, I've worked hard to create a fulfilling life for myself, despite their constant underestimation, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. Moving forward, I'll maintain contact with my therapist, who has been instrumental in helping me prepare for a life where my family doesn't have the power to hold me back. I've decided to keep interactions with them to a minimum and avoid pointless conversations. Relocating has even crossed my mind, packing up, starting fresh, and moving forward without the weight of their expectations. I'm aware that dating could bring its own set of challenges. Explaining my family dynamics to a future partner, especially if they come from a close-knit background, won't be easy. But I'm hopeful that one day I'll create a family of my own, one built on respect, trust, and understanding. In the meantime, I've taken some practical steps. I've placed a security freeze on my credit accounts to prevent any unauthorized access. If my brother accessed my information through dealership resources, I'm prepared to notify the relevant parties, as fraud is no small matter. I've also consulted with an attorney to update my beneficiaries, ensuring my assets go to the right people should anything happen to me. And, of course, I continue to rely on therapy to process the lingering sadness and guilt of stepping back from my family. Following that chaotic family dinner, I felt like I was leaving a war zone. As I drove home under the quiet night sky, I couldn't shake the thought that something had to change. If I didn't stop attending those gatherings, I might lose my sanity. Over the next 2 weeks, I focused on my work and mental well-being. My home became a sanctuary, with its gadgets and comic books providing both comfort and inspiration. I also increased my therapy sessions during that time. Dr. Bennett, my therapist, has been incredibly supportive. With his help, I've been learning to set boundaries that feel more like protective forts than impenetrable walls. As the days grew warmer, my thoughts turned toward the future, specifically relationships. For the first time in a long while, I began to feel that meeting someone special wasn't just a possibility, but a probability. And then, like something out of a comic book, Ava came into my life. Ava and I first met at a technology conference. Her talk on cybersecurity absolutely captivated me, not just because of the subject matter, but also because of her charisma. She was incredibly intelligent, grounded, and had a unique perspective on family dynamics that resonated with me. A love-centered approach tempered by firm boundaries. As our relationship deepened, the unspoken question of introducing Ava to my family's chaotic world began to loom over us. We spent countless evenings over pizza discussing strategies for navigating the inevitable. Eventually, we decided to start with brief, low-pressure interactions. Casual and short family gatherings became our approach, offering just enough visibility without overcommitting. Everything shifted when Ava offered to support me directly. Our initial efforts began with simple coffee meetups. These short, structured visits allowed me to ease back into family interactions while having Ava by my side. Unsurprisingly, the first few encounters were incredibly awkward. My parents were overly polite and cautiously formal, as though they feared I might disappear again at any moment. My brother, on the other hand, seemed to struggle with finding the right words, his discomfort almost palpable. My sister and her kids, however, provided a welcome reprieve. Her middle child, the one who reminded me so much of myself, immediately connected with Ava. Those coffee dates became a kind of experiment, a gentle re-entry into family life. They offered enough exposure to reconnect without the risk of being overwhelmed by the familiar dysfunction. To my surprise, this approach started to work. Slowly, my family began to adapt. I suspect they realized this was the only way to maintain a relationship with me. They gradually learned to respect my boundaries, and in doing so, the dynamic began to shift. As things improved, I started thinking about the bigger picture. What could the future hold for me and Ava? Together, we dreamed of creating a family built on mutual respect and genuine care, rather than on obligation and guilt. We knew challenges would come, but the vision of something healthier kept us motivated. One evening, while walking by the lake, Ava and I talked about the possibility of living together. I was struck by how much had changed in my life, from feeling utterly rejected by my family to standing on my own with a stronger sense of identity. It was like night and day. For the first time in years, I felt cautiously optimistic about what lay ahead. Although I know there will be rough patches and moments of doubt, I feel ready to face them. Setting boundaries with my family wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about creating space for new, meaningful relationships and a brighter future. The infamous Sunday dinners are still on the calendar, but now they happen on my terms. Sometimes I attend, other times I skip them entirely. When I do go, I bring Ava along, and we navigate any tension as a team. Despite the progress, challenges remain. The key lies in maintaining balance, staying connected without being overwhelmed. It's an ongoing process, but I'm learning how to keep things harmonious. As for everything else, there's so much happening in my life right now. I'm still figuring out how to share my journey with others, so bear with me as I sort through it all. Let me start by introducing the key players. I'm the narrator of this story. Peach and Mario are my 2 children, and Daisy is my soon-to-be ex-wife. Right now, we're in the middle of a particularly messy divorce. The main reason we're separating is that Daisy came to terms with her bisexuality earlier this year. Daisy directly expressed her desire for an open marriage, which I was completely uncomfortable with. Things escalated further when I discovered that Daisy had slept with one of my co-workers, someone I considered one of my closest friends. It felt like an unbearable betrayal, not only at home, but also in my professional life as a police officer. After that, there was no way we could stay together. I needed a break to process everything. At first, Daisy tried everything she could to save our marriage. But as it became clear that I was firm in my decision not to open our marriage, despite her reasons and pleas, things took a turn for the worse. Daisy's attitude shifted. She became bitter, and the last thing I wanted was for her to use our kids as pawns. She started telling Peach that she had to leave our home because I no longer loved them. "He hates you," she said, and accused me of destroying our family. Hearing that was heart-wrenching, especially seeing Peach's confusion and grief. Our children now often stay at Daisy's mother's house. Daisy and her new partner, whom I'll refer to as AP, try to frame these visits as exciting vacations. It seems like an effort to play the cool parents and turn Peach and Mario against me by spoiling them with toys and treats. It's not just emotionally challenging. Daisy and I also disagree on nearly everything, from who gets which belongings, to how much financial support we should each contribute, to how to split time with Mario and Peach. Daisy resists every compromise. It seems like Daisy is complicating the situation herself. She has been telling the kids things that paint me as the villain, which is deeply unfair. Recently, Peach and Mario have been asking me if I dislike AP, and whether AP is better than I am. That's really disturbing to hear, and it's clearly confusing them. A few weeks ago, I was buried in a big project at work, pushing overtime to earn a promotion from officer to homicide investigator. Daisy and I had agreed that during this busy period, the kids would stay with her during the week and see me on weekends. I would stop by to pick them up and then take them to her house. One day, as I handed Mario his packed suitcase, he burst into tears and asked, "Are you taking us away because you hate us like Mom says?" That moment broke me. I hugged him tight and told him that I loved him, though at times it's hard to believe that everything will be okay. When I visited them last weekend, it felt strained. They didn't say much to me and seemed distant. It wasn't until today, when I picked them up, that I could truly talk to them. They both looked so sad, especially Peach. She still shows love for me, but it's clear that Daisy is making it harder for her. I'm now trying to figure out the best path forward to minimize the damage to the kids. This kind of manipulation in family dynamics is incredibly painful. Peach is struggling, feeling like she can't love me anymore, and that breaks my heart. I can't just stand by and watch her suffer. This divorce is intentionally hurting them, and I'm starting to question everything. Do I push forward with the divorce? Can I proceed while protecting my children? Or should I just accept the situation and stay in it? I reached out for some advice, and the response was clear. You need to speak with your divorce attorney about everything immediately. This is a case of parental alienation. A judge will likely intervene and order it to stop, though enforcing it could be difficult. You need to act quickly, document everything, and keep pushing forward with the divorce. Daisy's behavior is damaging, and it will only get worse if you stay silent. Make sure you pursue the divorce and document everything. This is parental alienation, and it was a key factor in my friend's custody victory because his ex-wife was doing the same thing. Consult a lawyer as soon as possible and keep records of Daisy's actions. Your kid's well-being is paramount. Get the medical attention if needed, as this environment is harmful. Your children shouldn't be left alone with her without any oversight. Inform your lawyer of what's going on, and if necessary, report Daisy's behavior to Child Protective Services, CPS. Never let her actions go unchecked if it means protecting your kids. They deserve better than this.